Hello, thank you very much for joining this webinar about Retina Workplace. My name is Claudia Wasch. I'm the product manager for Retina Workplace at ZEISS Meditech. And I will talk to you about today how I will introduce you to the Retina Workplace solution, but also try to incorporate information on how Retina Workplace can help you, especially during these difficult times when it comes to efficiently working with all the data that you have, all the imaging data, and efficient patient communication during those COVID-19 times. To begin, what is Retina Workplace? Retina Workplace is not a standalone product. Retina Workplace is part of the overall ZEISS solution in ophthalmology, and is part of the Forum solution. Forum is a PACS system, or an image management system, as some would call it, that takes in image data and exam data from pretty much any device that you can have in the ophthalmic department, not just ZEISS devices. Retina Workplace, on top of that, is an additional add-on that can take in these ZEISS Cirrus OCT information and any fundus camera that is basically DICOM compatible. And it can take that information and integrate it in a very powerful way that I'm going to show you today. But if you wanted to say on a very high level, what does Retina Workplace do? Retina Workplace does two things. It brings the OCT information to you side by side in a synchronized manner so that you can easily identify change and correlate change and show you and help you decide how effective is my patient's treatment. Do I need to be more aggressive? Do we need to treat again soon, for example, inject? The other component is looking at just the individual exam from one day, but incorporating and connecting that information across multiple modalities. So looking at OCT, OCTA, and fundus data all together, register to each other, so that you don't have to, you can skip all the guesswork about what parts and what pathology you're looking at different images and how they correlate to each other. Retina Workplace will do that for you and integrate everything. And we're going to go through that in detail. I'm going to show you a few cases that will highlight how that functionality actually works and how it can help you. Now, with COVID-19, Forum and Retina Workplace come in specifically handy. It's a fully digital solution that, again, brings in everything onto one screen, all your patient information, all your patient data and exam data. So with a solution like this, of course, there's no longer a necessity to move around much in the office, to go from one device to another for image review, or depend on printouts to review data, or even look at different instrument applications. Everything is in one application, everything is integrated. So that, of course, saves a lot of time and takes out a lot of guesswork. And that leads us to the first point, minimal exposure. You can basically stay in your seat all day and review everything you need right from there without having to move around much. But also having quick and efficient access to all the data is really important. So that the information is there, is processed, loads quickly, and is integrated so you easily understand what you're seeing, and you do not start manually in your head to correlate what you see on the different information on how information correlates in time. And lastly, and very important, is patient communication. We know that a lot of the patient communication today now happens online, over video calls, over screen sharing calls. Of course, you can use the solution also using regular tools that have now become so popular, like Zoom, for example, to share information with your patient and visualize for them what you would like them to understand. But even more so, here it is very important that those tools are really effective, because you do not sit right next to your patient where you can even point with your finger to specific things, pull up different information on a screen or on paper, or pull up a model. It's important to just give them one screen and have all information on there that they need to understand. For patients, it's already challenging to know what they're seeing to begin with. You show a patient a picture of the retina, an OCT scan or a fundus image, and most people don't know what they're seeing. So for them to not having to do that mental jump between different type of exams can be very powerful to understand what they're seeing. And I will show you this on a few examples on how Retina Workplace helps you monitor patient change in your patient, but also in how it helps you correlating findings across modalities and explain that to your patient. So the first case we're going to look at is an AMD progression case. What you see here is the patient directory and forum, and we are going to go to open the patient AMD progression. And what you see here is the patient record. So that patient record has now opened, and you see the data for all that patient that is available. And you can see on the right-hand side, you see the visit history, which is where you can click through all the different dates and see what type of exams are available for that patient. You can even filter just by the OCT information for that patient or by other type of information. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go straight into the analysis tool, which is the Retina Workplace macular thickness analysis. So this is an AMD patient that has a bunch of macular cubes taken over time. And we're going to go on the left-hand side, you see Retina Workplace, which is where we go and select the macular thickness analysis. And here we see the most recent 3 exams are being automatically loaded. You can also change that default, and you could say, you can pick a particular exam and say, I want always this exam to be my baseline. And then you would see that on the left-hand side, and the 2 exams on the right would be your most common exams. And then the nice thing is here, those exams are all correlated to each other and synced to each other. So as you scroll through them, you see that they are all correlated. You're scrolling through the same B scans in the same locations to see how information has changed and how the condition of your patient has changed. So you see, for example, a lot of edema and swelling in fluid in the first exam, and that is very easy for the patient to understand and the patient to show, and you can show them how it is different with the most current exam, which you're seeing on the right-hand side. And this should be fairly easy for the patient to follow when we explain to them that we shouldn't be seeing this fluid. And then we can explain to them why it is important that there may be another injection is necessary sooner or later, and just tell them what we're looking for. We can also, if your patient likes something more visual information, some people are more familiar with or comfortable with numbers, we can bring in the chart information. This information actually, and let's zoom in a little bit, shows measurements for that we're looking at that are specifically interesting. In this case, it's the average thickness under the ETDRS grid and the central subfield measured over time for each exam. So it's not only for the most recent 3 that you see here, but for any exam that exists for that patient. And you could swap out the exams. You could look at any exams here that you would like to see. By default, it is going to be the most recent 3. And we have a lot of options here in these drop-down menus on the type of information that you would like to track and see how things have changed over time. Let's close that. And for example, here we see a peak in the thickness under the ETDRS in the central subfield. This is specifically a worrisome occasion. That is actually the exam that we see here on the left-hand side. And in those tooltips, you can see also the measurements, the actual numbers that were measured for that exam. And showing up and down graphs often help people or patients understand easier what is going on and see that this is a dynamic disease, AMD in this case, where there's changes are very common, and monitoring it is very important. Some patients may be much more comfortable with seeing grids, overlays, and graphics. So we're going to this chart here on the left-hand side, and this shows us all the overlays that we have. So we have a lot of the things you may already be familiar with as an OCT user, or even as a ZEISS user. These are thickness maps, the fundos, but we also have the ETDRS overlay here with the normative colors in there. And of course that most patients intuitively understand, because we know green is good, red is bad, yellow is so-so, and we're showing them how their condition has changed over time, just by showing those things side by side with a simple click. And we haven't left the screen once in in this entire case yet. We can also look at a few more of all these overlays that we have here that are the on-fast overlays that are available to look at the different slabs for that patient. And we can look here at the minimum intensity map. I'm going to select this, which is showing us where fluid has been detected. So this can be visualized here, highlighted in red, and to show the differences between 3 exams ago and the most current exam. So lots of different ways of showing the patient what is happening and where there's improvements, and encourage compliance with those patients as they see that things are getting better. We can get a little bit more analytical. So we also have the macular change analysis here on the left-hand side that we can select here. And it will bring up the most 2 recent exams, or any exams that you manually choose that you want to compare. And it shows you a delta map. So those 2 exams, and you saw it loaded, took a little bit of loading time, they get registered to each other so that they're absolutely exact. So that those numbers that you're seeing in the delta map really look at the exact same location in the eye or in the retina, and that can be compared. I actually must note here that we're using Zoom for this session, and Zoom unfortunately compresses information, so you may not see as nice and easy to read quality as I do, and also image quality. That is unfortunate, but I do see a pretty nice image quality here, but you may not be able to see the numbers that are being shown here on this delta map, depending also on the size of your screen. But you see all these different numbers. I'll make this a little bigger. That's showing you the thickness value for the ETDRS S grid. And then you can also click with your cursor anywhere in the map, and it will show you whatever the measurement is under that cursor. I'm showing you a few examples here. So it gives you some flexibility. That's maybe not something that patients find too particularly interesting, but we have found several doctors who are quite curious about digging into more detail. So you can dig as into much detail as you like, or keep it as simple as you like. Let's look at a different patient, a different case. And let's look at a case of OCTA. So we're going to open this patient that has neovascularization. So we're selecting the angio preset here. And also here, it's doing the same thing. It's loading the most recent 3 exams. Now with OCTA, we know that, let's hide this chart to make this bigger. We know that we can see blood flow, and that is a whole different set of information. And but also here, the information, the way you review data is very similar. You can scroll through the different types of, to the different B scans, and help your patient see everything synchronized. But then you can also point out where there is actually significant findings. So we can go to our overlay settings, and for example, look at the depth encoded map here. And that map here shows us clearly where there is the neovascularization. Of course, we always also see here in green, which is not too counterintuitive for patients when you tell them green is blood, but you can set everything to red if you like. But we see that there's blood here, or fluid here, where there shouldn't be any. And that is new vessel growth. And then we can also see it here, where there's something here, and this is the avascular zone. There shouldn't really be anything there, but we see neovascularization here. But we could also go straight to the avascular zone, which should be blank, should be pretty much clear and dark, like it is here on the right-hand side, and we can see here the growth on the left-hand side. And this is just something that's easy to understand and explain to your patient as they see this data. That this is what we're looking for. We're looking for, is there blood flow? Is there neovascularization? We're looking at these maps, and look, you have improved. That treatment is effective. Let's stay compliant. Let's keep going, so that your vision stays stable. And now I want to show you a case that is particularly interesting because it's one of those cases where we talk about integrating different modalities. We're looking at a case that is a branch retina vein occlusion. So I'm going to open up the OCTA. And you see here, if we had multiple exam dates, we don't have this for this particular case, but they would also be displayed side by side, up to 3 exams next to each other. But what you see here, what is special is that there's also fundus image data available, and that fundus image has been registered to the OCTA image. So let's look at this in full screen so we can see what is really going on here. I want to zoom out a little. So this case has a lot of pathology. Again, this is a vein occlusion, so we can end up in the periphery, and I hope you can see this, depending on how much compressed those images are. You can see hemorrhages is in the periphery. You can see a nevus also in the periphery, a lot of vessel tortuosity, shunt vessel at the optic nerve head, cotton wool spots, and a few other things. So let's zoom in some more and also zoom in on the B scan. And let's make this overlay that has been registered to the fundus image of the OCTA, let's make it transparent so we know what we're looking at. And so we know that it is not always easy just from looking at a fundus image to clearly identify what you're seeing. Microaneurysms versus hemorrhages, for example. It's not always clear what you're seeing. That's why the correlation is so important to see when you look at the fundus image, what is it exactly that I'm looking at? So for example, let's look at this microaneurysm here that we think is a microaneurysm, or it could be a hemorrhage. But if we click on it, it takes us to the exact same location in the OCT because the OCT has been registered to that fundus image. And in the OCT, right here, let's zoom in a little bit. We can see this is a microaneurysm. We see blood flow there. So it makes it clear to us, we know what we're seeing. We can also just switch out those images to make the OCT scan larger. And now we can see it here very clearly. That is that microaneurysm that we were looking at. Let's switch back to see the image in full view, because we also have an FAF green fundus image for that patient. So we can go here through this drop down where we can see all the images that have been registered for that patient and select this FAF green. And now we're seeing that same location. But what's also interesting here is now we can see where the actual occlusion happened. It is right here. And I'm gonna bring in the OCTA back in, because this occlusion here has led to some loss and you can see this in the OCTA. You can see in this area up here where there is actual loss of vasculature due to the occlusion. That is also something that is not easy to see on a fundus image. It is much easier to see on an OCTA where you're actually keeping track of blood flow and where you can show to your patient where the damages occurred, why they may have why they may have issues with their vision, so they can better understand what is going on. Let's zoom out a little bit, because also on an FAF green, nevuses are particularly easy to see. You can see it here, and the marking that you see here, this is also a way of marking up in your system, just adding annotations. So you have notes for later, also measurements. You can measure line measurements, area measurements, just using these tools up here. Let's go back to our fundus, and let's look at the OCT information that we have for that patient, because we don't have only OCTA information, we have also an OCT. This is the OCT for that patient, registered to the same fundus images that I've just showed you with the OCTA. I'm going to make this transparent. And we can see up here the cotton wool spots. And by clicking on those cotton wool spots, we can see them in the OCT right there. So very clearly cotton wool spots from earlier little infarcts. What we also can do, you see all the overlays that we have here on the right hand side. And we can click on the mid-retina overlay that gives us this specific segmentation. And let's hide the actual overlay, because what we want to do is we want to see the epiretinal membrane that this patient has. So if we zoom in, we see all these little speckles here. And to different views and different types of images that you take, and sometimes it's the image quality. It can't always be clear what it is that you're seeing, but we're suspecting epiretinal membrane. So we can take this mid-retina slab, and that is that is around the inner limiting membrane, and then down here is the second layer. So it's actually showing you a large section, a large slab of the retina. We can change that offset, which we will do here. We change that to 0, and we can change the range of this setting to 1. And now we have a very, very slim slab that we just created, and we can actually see the epiretinal membrane and the pulling of the epiretinal membrane. And let's look at the actual fovea, because here we see in the OCT, we see little lamellar holes forming from the epiretinal membrane pulling on it. Also, I make this bigger here, so you can see these lamellar holes. I'm going back to the large fundus and zooming out a little. And so this is a very high level overview of all the things you can do in Retina Workplace. But the important messaging here is that having the correlation of images of different types of modalities, where you just click on one image and it takes you to the exact same location of the other image of the other modality. So you know exactly what you're looking at. You're looking at from 2 different sides, and that makes it a lot easier for your patient also to understand, because you are not sending them back and forth between multiple screens and trying them to remember what they have been seeing, or trying to have to make up the logic in their own head on how all these things correlate to each other. And of course, some patients are more curious than others. And you can always adjust your way accordingly. Now, one question that we do get a lot is, well, this is really cool, but does this also work with OCT devices that are not from ZEISS? Unfortunately, it does not in this capacity. All these analyses that are done here are based on a lot of proprietary analysis algorithm, normative databases that ZEISS owns, and we only have access to that information. Vendors don't share that information amongst each other. That's why this is still a limitation in the market, to see vendors doing thickness analysis and then advanced analyses with data from other vendors, because everybody keeps this very proprietary. Hopefully this may change in the future so that there's more flexibility. But what you can do is, we do have also a tool to just review the OCT image data. So here we have a case that is a spectralis user who has a patient with a lot of spectralis data, and we will go here to the OCT navigator, and this will bring up the spectralis exams for that patient. So you can still see all the OCT B scans. You can scroll through them and see where they are located, see the fundus images. Everything is synchronized. So you have all that data available for review, and especially in retina, we know visual data is very important. It is critical to view the actual images and see the change, unlike in glaucoma, for example, where we rely heavily on statistics data and measurements.
And then also, if you want to bring in that data, those actual thickness measurements, then of course, Forum and Retina Workplace do give you access to all that information. Again, Retina Workplace, which is based on Forum, is based on this image management system that brings in the data from all your devices, not just from ZEISS devices. So any kind of reports, for example, the report that you can see here, which is a change report with lots of thickness measurements and numbers, that can be all imported. So you have all that data available. When it comes to the flexibility in viewing it, then really ZEISS devices are should be your product of choice, because then you have all that flexibility in terms of integrating everything. So my time is already up. I tried to squeeze in as much as possible into this short meeting. We will at 11:30. Dr. Eric Schneider will discuss how he uses Retina Workplace. So you can go there and hopefully join that. Don't miss it. That is in the live session. And also, if you're interested in more information, go to the landing page of this website, and there you can request a demo or have a chat with a sales rep and learn more about Retina Workplace.